Welcome to NTD Evening News. Our top story tonight, a federal judge today temporarily blocking the Trump administration from firing federal workers. That's as President Trump works to ensure the FBI and military get paid amid the prolonged shutdown. Meanwhile, the president and FBI Director Kash Patel highlight the results of Operation Summer Heat. Tout standing by at the White House. The Supreme Court today heard a second challenge to Louisiana's congressional district map. The case revisits what role race plays in drawing district lines. Arlene Richards breaks it down for us. After a ninth failed attempt to reopen the government, Senate Republicans tee up a vote on a defense appropriations bill to test Democrats' resolve to continue the shutdown. Luis Eduardo Martinez has the latest from Capitol Hill. Updates on immigration raids. Los Angeles County declares an emergency, and Broadview, Illinois takes down a fence at an ICE facility. But Homeland Security says its enforcement operations are to protect Americans. And the Hamas terrorist group hands over the bodies of 2 more hostages. This comes after Israel says that one recently returned body was not that of a hostage. Jason Perry reports.
This is NTD Evening News, live from our global headquarters in New York City. Here's Tiffany Meyer.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight. President Trump and FBI Director Kash Patel highlighting the accomplishments of the crime crackdown, and the president tightening federal hiring rules while a judge blocks the administration from firing federal workers. We now go live to NTD's Washington correspondent Mari Otsu at the White House. Good evening, Mari. What is the latest from the presser with the president and FBI director?
Tiff, good evening. Yes, President Trump tonight, alongside FBI Director Kash Patel, Attorney General Pam Bondi, and Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche, is touting the results of the crime crackdown called Operation Summer Heat, a 3-month FBI initiative to combat crime across the U.S. Take a look.
You have taken the handcuffs off them and let them do their jobs, and you let cops be cops.
Director Kash Patel announces that since January, more than 28,000 violent criminals have been arrested, nearly double last year, over 5,000 children rescued, and nearly 2,000 kilos of fentanyl seized, enough to kill 127 million Americans. And Patel says the Trump administration's efforts extend to transnational organized crime.
We have gone after espionage activities against our main counterparts in China, Russia, and Iran. In China alone, we've had over a 50% increase in espionage and arrests alone in prosecution.
This coming as the FBI director says that the Chinese Communist Party engages in the greatest level of espionage against the United States by penetrating our telecommunications infrastructure, water, energy, and electrical grids. And on China, when asked if we're in for a sustained trade war.
Well, you're in one now. Look, we have 100% tariff. If we didn't have tariffs, we would be exposed as being a nothing. We would have no defense. You know, they've used tariffs on us. If we don't have tariffs, we're not going to have national security.
And the president breaking some news on India, saying he spoke to Prime Minister Modi today.
And he assured me today that they will not be buying oil from Russia. That's a big stop. Now I got to get China to do the same thing.
President Trump suggests that India's move today speeds up the end of the war in Ukraine. He also emphasizes the importance of his tariff plan in ensuring national security, floating the idea of attending the Supreme Court arguments in the case against his tariffs. Tiff?
A lot to look out for before his reported upcoming meeting with Chinese leader Xi. And Mari, on another topic, though, what can you tell us about the orders President Trump is signing today?
Sure, Tiff. So in other efforts to ensure national security, President Trump is signing an executive order today tightening federal hiring rules. Now, we're on the 15th day of the government shutdown, and the Office of Management and Budget Director Russ Vought is saying that layoffs will likely reach north of 10,000. This is coming as a federal judge is blocking temporarily the Trump administration from firing federal workers, and the Senate vote on the government funding bill fails for the 9th time. But President Trump ensures that the military will be paid. Today, he's signing a memo directing Secretary of War Pete Hegseth and OMB Director Russ Vought to reallocate Department of War funds to pay U.S. troops on time during the government shutdown. The president also says that FBI workers will continue to get paid during this time. Tiff, back to you.
All right, Mari, thanks for those updates. The Supreme Court today once again heard arguments over the map for Louisiana's 6th congressional district, which was revised earlier this year to create an additional black majority district in the state. The High Court is now considering a lower court's reasons for blocking the revised map. NTD's Arlene Richards has more.
The Supreme Court on Wednesday heard 2 cases with opposite views on what role race should play when drawing congressional district lines. It's not the first time the court considered race in the state of Louisiana's map. In 2024, the High Court first reviewed a challenge to Louisiana's 6th congressional district map over claims that it was unfair to black voters. A court of appeals had ordered that the map be redrawn, which the legislature did. The new map included 2 black voter districts instead of just 1, and a majority of Supreme Court justices approved it for the 2024 election. Meanwhile, a new slate of voters, calling themselves non-African Americans, said the state relied too heavily on race when they redrew the map, and a panel of federal judges agreed. The Supreme Court decided in June that both cases should be restored to the calendar for re-argument. The attorney for the black voters argued to keep the revised map.
6 appellate judges affirmed findings that Louisiana, in the face of extreme racially polarized voting, packed and cracked black voters, and it rejected 7 non-dilutive maps in favor of one that would give its 58% declining white electorate entrenched control over 83% of the congressional districts. Louisiana's creation of a district to remedy that discrimination and to ensure that black Louisianans have an equal opportunity to participate in the process is constitutional.
The attorney for Louisiana argued that the revised map was based on racial stereotyping.
And it requires drawing in enough members of a minority race to sufficiently augment their voting strength. Embedded within these express targets are racial stereotypes that this court has long criticized. They assume, for example, that a black voter, simply because he is black, must think like other black voters, share the same interests, and prefer the same political candidates. And this stereotyping system has no logical endpoint.
He added that race-based districting has placed states in impossible situations which require more racial discrimination. The attorney for the non-African Americans also argued about stereotypes. He said the Voter Rights Act didn't justify the widespread stereotyping of American voters based on race, and that it violates the 14th and 15th Amendments. The justices now face the complicated task of deciding whether or not to reshape how race is considered in redistricting. Arlene Richards, NTD News.
Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act says that a jurisdiction's political processes must be equally open to all races. How do we get from here to black majority districts? Tonight on Capitol Report with Steve Lance, hear from former attorney for President Trump, Jim Trusty, at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. After the Senate vote on the GOP bill to end the government shutdown failed today for the 9th time, Senate Republicans are shifting their strategy to reopen the government and will now pursue full-year appropriation bills in order to end the shutdown. Our Washington correspondent Luis Arturo Martinez has more on the Republicans' new approach.
Today, if it weren't for the bold leadership of President Trump helping us to protect our military, everyone needs to understand that 1.3 million active duty service members would be missing a paycheck. They'll get their check, thankfully, because President Trump has shown strong leadership.
The Trump administration has reallocated $8 billion of unused research and development funds from the Department of War to pay active duty service members during the government shutdown. Senate Republicans have now teed up a vote for this Thursday on the House-passed defense appropriation bill to try and secure annual funding for the Department of War during the government shutdown.
Republicans want to pay the troops, and we have shown that with our actions and our votes now 9 times. And the Democrats want to use them as hostages to extort $1.5 trillion in new, unserious partisan spending that we just won't go along with.
The new Republican strategy in Congress is to continue the regular appropriations process despite Democrats' intransigence to reopen the government. Democrats, on the other hand, insist on their messaging and demanding that their policy priorities be met in order to reopen government.
We are ready, we are willing, and we are able to negotiate a bipartisan spending agreement that actually meets the needs of the American people. Reopen the government and decisively address the Republican health care crisis.
The Senate has already, on a bipartisan basis, passed 3 out of the 12 appropriations bills and is prepared to vote on a 4th one this Thursday.
Mr. President, Democrats attempt to defend their funding blockade by complaining that Republicans won't negotiate. But what exactly is there to negotiate? Negotiation happens when you have two sides, each with its own demands. Republicans have no demands.
The vote on the defense appropriations bill this Thursday also served as a pressure point on moderate Democrats who have already said they want to see the regular appropriations process play out to fund government. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
In the Middle East, the Hamas terrorist group is continuing to hand over the bodies of deceased hostages from the Gaza Strip. But after lab tests, an Israeli official says one of the bodies is not that of a hostage. NTD's Jason Perry has the details.
On Wednesday, Israel's chief of the general staff met with newly released hostages whom Hamas had held in captivity for almost 2 years. And the former hostages continue to be monitored at hospitals in Israel. An executive at one of the hospitals said their road to recovery will be a very long one.
Every one of them has endured untold adversity and horrors. They will probably need weeks, months, and maybe years to heal, but they're finally taking their first steps to return to life here at the Sheba Medical Center.
And he added that some of the former hostages may soon be discharged to outpatient care next week. On the same day, people filled the streets during a funeral procession for deceased hostage Guy Illouz. Hamas returned his body from the Gaza Strip on Monday, and his dad spoke at his funeral after seeing his son's body at the Forensic Institute.
I kissed your forehead and saw your beauty, even in the state you came back to us in. I saw that beauty, my guy. I love you so much, love you so much. You will be missing from my life every second and minute.
Meanwhile, the head of the Israeli Forensic Institute said that one of the bodies Hamas recently handed over is not the body of any of the deceased hostages. The father of one hostage, who some believe is deceased, is still waiting for news about his son, and he shared his feelings.
You start the day anticipating to get the worst phone call that you will in your lifetime, and then feel disappointed when you do not get that phone call, which is a very complex thing to process.
The Israel Defense Forces said that 2 more bodies of deceased hostages had been returned to Israel on Wednesday. Meanwhile, in the Gaza Strip, residents were seen moving about as the ceasefire continues to hold. However, the United States military has now called on the Hamas terrorist group to stop shooting at innocent civilians in the territory. The U.S. also said they expressed their concerns to mediators who have agreed to work with the U.S. to enforce the peace and protect innocent civilians in Gaza. This comes as Turkish rescue teams are expected to soon depart to Gaza as part of the ceasefire agreement between Israel and Hamas, and will reportedly take part in a joint task force to help locate the bodies of deceased hostages in the territory. Jason Perry, NTD News.
President Trump says India will stop buying oil from Russia after months of pressure from the U.S. And War Secretary Pete Hegseth's plane experienced a mid-air emergency today after he addressed NATO members in Europe. NTD's international correspondent Arian Pozdar has the story.
During a NATO meeting on Wednesday, War Secretary Pete Hegseth had this message for Russia.
Now, if this war does not end, if there is no path to peace in the short term, then the United States, along with our allies, will take the steps necessary to impose costs on Russia for its continued aggression.
He added that the War Department is ready to do its part in ways only the United States can. He made the remarks at a meeting of Ukraine's allies at NATO headquarters on Wednesday.
All countries need to translate goals into guns commitments into capabilities, and pledges into power. That's all that matters, hard power. It's the only thing belligerents actually respect.
He added that the U.S. is willing to deliver more weapons to NATO member countries. Hegseth urged allies to ramp up investment in the prioritized Ukraine requirement list program. This replaced U.S. weapons donations to Ukraine and now requires allies to pay for U.S. weapons deliveries. Then, on his way back to the U.S., Hegseth's plane had an emergency. This map shows where the plane was above the ocean before it turned around to land in the UK. According to Flight Radar 24, the plane suddenly lost attitude and dropped to only 10,000 feet. It's not yet clear what caused the incident. According to the War Department, the plane made an unscheduled landing in the United Kingdom due to a crack in the aircraft windshield. Everyone on board, including Secretary Hegseth, is safe. Back at NATO, Wednesday's meetings weren't only about Ukraine. NATO members Germany, Belgium, Poland, Estonia and Romania all report recent airspace violations. Some of them are directly blaming Russia.
NATO will implement a number of additional counter-drone measures that will build on and expand and accelerate our ability to counter drones.
NATO and EU member states recently agreed to build a so-called drone wall, which would detect and destroy incoming Russian drones. Germany on Wednesday announced that it will allocate over $11 billion on drones, while also strongly supporting the drone wall.
NATO Chief Mark Rutte has presented a plan to strengthen drone defense. In light of recent incidents, this can only be welcomed. Germany will, of course, also make a visible contribution here.
The German defense minister added that Berlin will deploy 2 Eurofighter jets in Poland from December to March to patrol airspace. Arian Pastar, NTD News.
Coming up, the Treasury Secretary issues a new warning. If tensions with China continue to escalate over rare earth minerals, the U.S. could cut economic ties entirely. That's as President Trump says we have now entered a trade war with China. Jack Bradley reports, and a panel of experts joins us to break down the latest trade disputes after the break. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. The U.S. is signaling the possibility of drastic steps in response to China's stranglehold on rare earth minerals, which are vital for the defense and tech industries. U.S. officials say they could cut trade ties with China altogether if it continues. President Trump now saying we are in a trade war with China. NTD's Washington correspondent Jack Bradley has more on how this affects everything from car manufacturing to national security.
Are we in for a sustained trade war with China?
Well, you're in one now.
President Trump says the U.S. is in a trade war with China. That's as Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent says if China continues its rare earth export restrictions, the U.S. may be forced to cut economic ties with China.
If China wants to be an unreliable partner to the world, then the world will have to decouple.
Now, to be clear, Bessent emphasized that decoupling is not the goal. The administration wants to de-risk and diversify, not sever ties altogether. But he said China's latest move in restricting 5 more rare earth elements last week and dozens of related technologies sends a message that, well, can't be ignored. And U.S. industries are already feeling the pressure. Bessent said U.S. automakers are reporting delays in getting Chinese-made magnets that contain rare earths. He also accused the CCP of giving non-credible explanations for those delays.
When we asked the Chinese about this, they said, oh, it probably had something to do with the holiday. Had something to do with the holiday. So they can't be trusted with the global supply chain.
Meanwhile, we're seeing some major companies trying to adapt. Stellantis, the car maker behind Jeep and Dodge, just announced a massive $13 billion U.S. investment, their largest ever, to boost domestic production and reduce its dependence on China. Long term, the U.S. is shifting strategies, now going on offense with industrial policy. That means price floors, forward buying, and long-term investments in critical minerals, not just rare earths, all to protect any U.S. industry that's vulnerable to Chinese market manipulation. Also, on China's rare earth mineral export restrictions last week, Bessent now says that they were made by a different CCP official without Chinese leader Xi Jinping's knowledge.
Lower level trade person who was slightly unhinged here in August. I think his name is Li Guangdong, and threatening, saying that China would unleash chaos on the global system if the U.S. went ahead with our docking fees for Chinese ships.
Li Chengong is China's Vice Minister of Commerce. He's widely viewed as belonging to a faction within the Chinese Communist Party that opposes Xi Jinping. Bessent said earlier this week that this is a sign of the Chinese Communist Party's brittle nature, with party infighting more than prevalent. Reporting by Jack Bradley, NTD News.
And we have a panel joining us to discuss these latest developments on China. David Blackman is an energy policy analyst and advisor. He's also a senior contributor to Forbes. Grant Newsham is a retired U.S. Marine colonel, former U.S. diplomat, senior fellow at the Center for Security Policy, and author of When China Attacks. Thank you both so much for joining us. Now, David, drill down for us why China's announcement on further rare earth restrictions shook countries around the world so much. Just how reliant is the world right now on China for these?
Oh, very much reliant. Pretty much every country is. China controls roughly 80% of the supply chain capacity globally for these kinds of minerals, 65% or so of the production. So it's a big player in this scene, and it's this latest round of restrictions that were announced anyway, really seek to lock down control of not just their own exports of these minerals, but control of other countries with whom they have economic relationships through their Belt and Road Initiative. And that's a big deal. I mean, that's a really huge issue for the United States and other countries.
And Grant, there is also a diplomatic angle here. We heard Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent today publicly calling out a Chinese official, Li Chenggan, saying he showed up uninvited to talks, has threatened chaos to the global economy, and is tapping into the wolf warrior mindset. What do you make of all of this? How rare is it to see a U.S. official call out a Chinese official by name?
Well, it's nice to hear somebody sort of talking straight. We've had too many administrations where they'll put the best face on things and try to cover it up, but Secretary of Treasury Bessent is laying this down clearly, and it's about time we hear that sort of language from this administration.
And David, as for what we can expect from the U.S., Bessent is saying the U.S. may decouple from China if this rare earth dispute persists. How likely is that, and what kind of impact would that have on global markets?
It would have an enormous impact on global markets if we fully decoupled from China. Hopefully it won't advance to that point, because it would have cascading impacts throughout the American economy and the other Western nations. But yes, I mean, the U.S. is going to have to respond to this. Hopefully, President Trump, in his discussion with Xi Jinping, President Xi Jinping, at the end of October over in South Korea, they will be able to reach some sort of amicable agreement on this. But as you heard in the previous report, there's this infighting happening within the Communist Party there in China. And so, you know, we're in this situation, unfortunately, that's developed over the last half century, really, where we are so reliant on China, and these political conflicts that happen within the Communist Party there can have a very significant impact, and not a good one, on our own country.
And Grant, we did hear President Trump today saying we are in a trade war now. What would decoupling from China mean for the global order? What changes could we see on that level?
It depends on how fast it happens. You know, if you try to go cold turkey, then you're going to have just chaos. Because this is, as you just heard, this is the outcome of 30, 40, 50 years of America getting itself so deeply into bed with China, getting addicted to that market, that to suddenly stop it and break it all would be very, very disruptive. It may be that that's where we end up, and I think that that is where we are going to end up, but it's going to take some time. And how much time? At least 5-10 years. But you have to go about it sort of carefully, but you do have to hurry at the same time. And this is a dangerous dependency, and the Chinese have they've got a chokehold on us, and they're playing it. I think they believe that either Mr. Trump will back down, or that the Chinese will actually prevail. Because this is really they've already seen how well it has worked, and when they did play the rare earth card earlier, that the administration had to back down because of the effects that it was going to have on American industry. So we've got to hurry, but you really can't blame Mr. Trump for this, because this is something that our best and brightest in the financial and business sectors and on Capitol Hill have got us into this mess. Now, untangling it is going to be difficult, but it is just as necessary.
And speaking of this chokehold, David, while the rare earth minerals themselves might not be that rare, China does dominate the processing and refining capabilities, as you mentioned earlier, cornering that market. Now, we are seeing reports that the EU is looking to partner with the U.S. and other G7 countries to try to cut reliance on China's rare earths. Given that defense industries are quite reliant on these minerals, if China does withhold them, how big of a blow would that be around the world?
Well, it's very big. I mean, the Pentagon has need for these minerals and the magnets and chips made from them in pretty much all of their modern weapon systems. So, but we do have inventories of these minerals to some extent, although it's not real clear to me just how big they are and how long they would last. And so this is really an emergency situation that's evolving here for the Pentagon and for our national security. And that's why you saw the Pentagon make the deal with MP Materials out in California, which is really the only sizable processor of these minerals in the United States. That doesn't solve the entire problem, but it's a good start. But they're going to have to do many more of those kinds of actions here in the coming months, really to just increase our country's security to withstand any sort of complete cutoff from these imports of these minerals.
And Grant, there is, of course, an economic angle here, but I want to zoom out a bit to the political, as we've been hearing these increasing reports on Xi Jinping's grip or lack thereof on power. What do these recent moves from China signal about that, or do they signal anything?
I would take a little bit different view. I think Xi Jinping is calling the shots here. I'm not convinced that it is a sort of internecine fight in the Chinese bureaucracy. I think Xi Jinping is firmly in power, and I think this is his call. And I think they have decided to really take the gloves off and dare the Americans to do something. If you look beyond just the rare earths, the Chinese behavior and language elsewhere suggests that they're out looking for a fight. I think they have the upper hand, and are going to push on this. So this is new territory. I've never seen anything like it, but I think China thinks it's got a window before America can get its act together, and they are going to push on this. And this is serious.
A lot to watch for here for sure. David Blackman, Grant Newsham, thank you both so much for joining us. Turning now to Europe, France's parliament is preparing to hold a new no-confidence vote against the newly reappointed prime minister. This comes amid worsening economic conditions and growing doubts about President Emmanuel Macron's leadership. NTD international correspondent David Yves reports from Paris.
France's political crisis is far from over. After suspending a key pension reform to avoid an earlier collapse, Prime Minister Sébastien Lecornu is now facing a new no-confidence vote on Thursday. Lawmakers from both the conservative and leftist groups have filed no-confidence motions. According to policy analyst Philippe Fabry, Lecornu, who resigned last week before being reappointed days later by President Emmanuel Macron, is walking on thin ice.
Given the current configuration of Parliament and the general state of anger among the opposition, I think that censorship will happen very soon.
Calls for a resignation or snap legislative elections continue to echo in the parliament.
Emmanuel Macron himself clearly appear as a cause for the problems inside the parliament, as this has been going on for 2 years and shows no sign of stopping. We are moving increasingly towards a resignation of President Macron or a slowly downgrading of Emmanuel Macron's presidential office's power.
The budget talks add to local news troubles, with rising debt and deficit concerns shaking investor confidence. Former IMF official Desmond Lachman warned in L'Express that France's fiscal crisis could spill over to the Eurozone, describing the country as in great budgetary disorder. He said markets may soon force Macron into radical choices, even suggesting early elections might be the only way out of the crisis. European Central Bank President Christine Lagarde said any further political instability in Paris could have an obvious impact on financial markets. Fabrice says this is an expected scenario.
I think the out-of-control debt is one of the factors that will cause the French political crisis to spread to the European level. We are likely heading into a political crisis on a Europe-wide scale. It's difficult to make an accurate prediction, but France's credit rating is under close watch, with new evaluations due soon. There are also growing tensions between the European Parliament and the European Commission, as Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has already faced 3 no-confidence votes this year.
President Macron has warned that if another no-confidence vote passes in the Parliament, he would call for snap legislative elections. David Vives, NTD News, Paris.
Coming up, former lawmaker Katie Porter is facing scrutiny after several tense exchanges are caught on video. The California gubernatorial candidate is now speaking out and taking responsibility. Christina Corona has the details when we come back. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. ICE and Homeland Security have been busy with immigration enforcement, but some leaders in Los Angeles say their community is being disrupted and the county has declared an emergency. But Homeland Security says it's just protecting Americans. NTD's David Lamb reports.
Los Angeles County has declared an emergency this week over ongoing immigration raids by ICE. The emergency proclamation passed by a 4-1 vote on Tuesday, stating that raids, which started in June, have, quote, caused residents to be fearful of leaving their homes to go to work, take public transportation, and access county services. On the other hand, Homeland Security Assistant Secretary Tricia McLaughlin told NTD, this isn't the first time sanctuary politicians in Los Angeles have put lawbreakers ahead of Americans. The fact is, while these politicians play Russian roulette with American lives, ICE and Border Patrols are removing the worst of the worst from Los Angeles streets. Since operations began in June, ICE and Border Patrol have made more than 5,000 arrests in Los Angeles, including of gang members, rapists, thieves, and murderers. Our law enforcement should be thanked by the Board of Supervisors, not demonized. Los Angeles County has one of the country's largest immigrant populations. This week, Homeland Security said that Mexican cartels have placed bounties on ICE and Border Protection agents. But DHS warned on Tuesday that people who dox, threaten, or lay hands on their officers will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. It said their officers are facing more than a 1,000% increase in assaults. Meanwhile, after a judge's order, crews have taken down a fence that surrounded an ICE facility in Broadview, Illinois. Protesters argue the fence was a safety hazard, but DHS says the fence was for protection. DHS said some of the detainees inside its Broadview facility were convicted of crimes, including assault with a deadly weapon, felony robbery, drug possession, and driving under the influence. First responders are implementing safety measures in the area to protect First Amendment rights and public safety. David Lamb, NTD News.
California gubernatorial candidate Katie Porter is making headlines after 2 viral videos capture her intense exchanges. In a recent interview, Porter says she wants her supporters to know she's owning up to her actions. NTD's Christina Corona has more.
California Democratic gubernatorial candidate and former lawmaker Katie Porter stated that she could have handled things better after viral videos surfaced showing tense exchanges with the reporter and a staffer. In one clip, Porter threatened to walk out on CBS California correspondent Julie Watts during an interview that went viral last week.
Well, to those voters, okay, so you...
I don't want to keep doing this. I'm going to call it. Okay. Thank you.
You're not going to do the interview with us?
Nope, not like this. I'm not. Not with 7 follow-ups to every single question you ask.
Every other candidate has answered.
I don't care.
Follow-ups.
I don't care.
In another video obtained by Politico, Porter is seen using profanity at a staffer who was standing behind her during a 2021 meeting with the Biden administration.
And other problems, and the state could lose. Get out of my shot.
The staffer was trying to inform Porter about climate issues, but she also criticized the staffer for previously appearing in the background.
Paris Climate Accord.
Okay, it does. Okay, you also were in my shot before that. Stay out of my shot.
Porter appeared on KTLA's Inside California Politics, which aired Tuesday night, to address the videos.
When I look at those videos, I want people to know that I understand that I could have handled things better. I think I'm known as someone who's able to handle tough questions, who's willing to answer questions. I think people who know me know I can be tough, but I need to do a better job expressing appreciation for the amazing work that my team does.
Porter says she wants voters to understand her reasons for running, highlighting her goal of ensuring California has a governor who will act firmly and address the state's affordability crisis. Porter also said this week that she had apologized to the staff member. While holding herself accountable for the clips, Porter said her supporters back her because they want a strong candidate who will fight for the state. Christina Corona, NTD News.
Massachusetts Congressman Seth Moulton says he's challenging Senator Ed Markey in next year's Democratic primary, calling for what he describes as a new generation of leadership. In a campaign video, the 46-year-old Marine veteran said Democrats are stuck in the status quo and not fighting hard enough to win the future. Markey has served in Congress for nearly 50 years. He would be 80 when his next term begins. Moulton's campaign will focus on affordability, healthcare, and protecting democracy. The race sets up a high-profile generational clash in one of the nation's bluest states. Coming up in baseball, the Blue Jays have their backs against the wall as they face the Mariners tonight in Seattle. Dave Martin joins us to discuss when we come back. And now for your sports news, we're joined by NTD's Dave Martin. Dave, plenty going on right now, but let's start in baseball because tonight we have Game 3 of the ALCS with Seattle leading Toronto 2-0. How important is it for the Blue Jays to get a win tonight?
Yeah, it's very important. I mean, every playoff game is big, obviously, but if the Blue Jays lose tonight, they fall behind then 3-0 here to Seattle. Now, only once in the 100-plus years of baseball's postseason has a team ever recovered from a 0-3 deficit in the playoffs. That was the Red Sox over the Yankees back in the 2004 ALCS. Even worse for Toronto, they lost the first 2 games at home. So if they're going to do this, it's going to have to start tonight in Seattle on the road where games 3 and 4 are. And Toronto, to do it really, they're going to have to definitely start hitting. I mean, that's very obvious. Blue Jays had little problem with the Yankees pitching in the ALDS. But through 2 games against Seattle, the team's hitting a combined 143, just 2 total extra base hits in those 2 games. Vlad Guerrero 0 for 7 with a walk. Now for tonight's game, Toronto has former Cy Young winner Shane Bieber on the mound opposite the Mariners' George Kirby. The game starts at 8 p.m. Eastern Time.
All right, well, looking at the NLCS, the Dodgers got another dominant pitching performance last night and shutting down the Brewers.
Yeah, did they ever? Yoshinobu Yamamoto pitched a complete game gem, allowed 1 run, 3 hits through 9 innings, struck out 7. Dodgers won 5-1. That marked the first complete game in the playoffs since Justin Verlander, then with Houston, did it to the Yankees back in 2017, actually 8 years ago exactly to the day. Now, Yamamoto actually allowed a leadoff home run on the very first pitch he threw to Jackson Chourio, but he was pretty much lights out after that. And that was just one day after Blake Snell shut down the Brewers with 8 shutout innings in Game 1. So in the NLCS, the Brewers are actually in the exact same scenario that the Blue Jays are in, having lost the first 2 games of the series at home. So Game 3 against the Dodgers then will be Thursday night. So we'll talk more about this tomorrow, all right, Tiff?
All right. Shifting gears, though, to next year's World Cup, President Trump was asked about possibly moving one of the sites for next year's games in Boston. That's over public safety concerns.
Yeah, FIFA has scheduled 7 World Cup games next year in the Boston area. They'll be at actually Gillette Stadium, that's in Foxborough, Massachusetts, roughly 30 miles away. Now, last week, there was some public unrest in Boston where police say some 200 to 300 people. Protesters blocked police vehicles from passing. Several officers were assaulted. It resulted in 13 arrests. Trump was then asked yesterday about possibly moving some World Cup games over public safety concerns. Here's what he had to say here.
We could take them away. I love the people of Boston. I know the games are sold out, but your mayor, she's radical left, and they're taking over parts of Boston. That's a pretty big statement, right? We could get them back in about 2 seconds. All she has to do is call us. We'll go in and take them back. But she's afraid to because she thinks it's bad politically. The answer is yes. If somebody is doing a bad job, and if I feel there's unsafe conditions, I would call Johnny, the head of FIFA, who's phenomenal, and I would say, let's move it to another location. And he would do that. He wouldn't love to do it, but he'd do it. Very easily he'd do it. And this is the right time to do it.
So it sounds like it would be really more of a joint decision because he kept saying we between him and FIFA President Gianni Infantino, who he's very close with. So stay tuned on this subject, but this subject was actually not brought up by Trump. It was actually brought up by a reporter, so just an FYI on that.
I mean, sounds like a lot at stake, especially like tourism revenue, all the people visiting.
I know, the game's already sold out. 7 games, there's 7 games next year, I think somewhere in the quarterfinals. So yeah, it would be a pretty big deal. But he's also close to Robert Kraft, who's the Patriots owner, who is also involved in this deal. So stay tuned on this one. I don't know what else to say other than it would be a tough situation if they had to actually do it, but we'll see.
Looking at NFL news then, New York Jets head coach Aaron Glenn today called the speculation over whether their trade running back Breece Hall, quote, rumors. What reason would the Jets have to trade him?
Well, as of now, he's unsigned for next season, and the Jets are 0-6. They have the worst record in the league. They're usually talented players on teams that aren't headed towards the playoffs, are prime candidates to be traded, especially if they're not going to be there the next season. Hall, he's very talented. He's 10th in the NFL in yards from scrimmage. The guy's only 24 years old now still. He's in his 4th season there with the Jets. Now, meanwhile, behind him, the Jets do have 21-year-old Braylon Allen, who's a very good running back himself, but he's on the injured reserve now, so that kind of complicates matters. In any case, the trade deadline is on November 4th, so expect these trade rumors to expect trades to actually happen leading up in that final week, I would say, up to November 4th. Right now, it's all speculation. That's what I'm trying to say. That final week, you'll get the actual trades going down. That's what I'm trying to say.
So everything is gossip.
Yeah, everything right now is pretty much just gossip. This was a good piece of gossip, though, wasn't it?
Well, on that note, Dave, as always, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Tiff.
And that's all for today's news. Round-the-clock coverage, visit us at ntd.com/live or download our NTD app. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Good night.